Okay. We are in the Tzidkas Hatzadik Ois Lamed Hey. And here Reb Tzadok speaks about mazikim. He touched upon it before. So mazikim are generally not understood. And I don't think you're going to understand it after this year either, but I just want to do a little bit Lafi what we're able to be masig a little bit in what this means. What does it mean? But Reb Tzadok has a very mazikim. So mazikim is a catch-all term for shadim, for all kinds of spiritual attackers on the negative dark side. That's what they are. They're all called mazikim. Catch-all and Chazal were clearly very aware of these spiritual forces that are around, and they were clearly very worried about it. The Gemara tells all kinds of stories, all the way from Biylã to Rava to Rabbi Shmuel Kohen Gadol, about their like fights with the demons, and it's not something that's easy to relate to these days, and which is for obvious scientific reasons, perhaps. Ad kedei kach that there are, which I'll show you in a minute, there are great gedolim that said that there are no more mazikim. Done, finished. But I'll tell you a story I once read very quickly that. I'm just about to tell the story that Rav Kook, all of a sudden became the Rav of Yerushalayim, which was a high-pressure job for him and very, not accepted by many people, etc. But anyways, he was taking a walk at night. Rav Kook was taking a walk in Yerushalayim at night, and one of the Talmidim ran after him, and they said, "Let me walk with the Rav." So he said, "Okay, why do you want to walk with me?" He says, "Because the Talmud Chacham, sheyotze yechidi b'layla, so the mazikim can get him." That's what the guys, like, you got to be careful with the mazikim. Talmud Chacham yotze yechidi b'layla. So Rav Kook said to him that here in Yerushalayim, the mazikim don't consider me a Talmud Chacham. Okay, that's the only funny thing I have to say today. But right, so, like a humorous but very deep Rav Kook, I think. The truth of the matter is that it's a little bit Rav Kook l'shitasai, because he held that there were no mazikim in Eretz Yisrael. He says since the time they built the Bayis Sheni, I think he says, because of the kedusha, all the mazikim were gone. And he says you have to check if this is true, even from our Gemara. I mean, if he says it is true, but we have to check it anyway. If all the stories are all about either before the Binyan Beis HaMikdash, or we're all in Bavel, just have to do that check. But it's not mashma from our Gemara right here in Brachos. I just want to say this because our Gemara in Brachos is talking about that Rabbi Yossi walked into one of the Chorvos Yerushalayim, and Eliyahu Navi told him you can't go in there b'mipnei hamazikim. So you have l'chayra before Gemara, but that is what Reb Tzadok says. So let's just review inside for a moment, and we'll see what I think is a very unique shita of Reb Tzadok. Lamed Hey. La yichnais l'chorba. The Gemara says you shouldn't go into a chorba. That's a place, as we've touched up, which was left desolate, which was no longer in use. Chorvos Yerushalayim. Don't go inside. Tishchichim mazikim, because it's got a lot of ghosts in the chorva of Yerushalayim. Ayin sham b'gemara oid shnei taimen. Ayin sham nafkamina behem. The Gemara says other reasons not to walk into a chorva, but one of them is the ghosts. Ayin bava kama chaf aleph amud aleph. Look, says Reb Tzadok, into bava kama chaf aleph amud aleph. Uber Rashi ayin sham. That there the Gemara says, very interesting Gemara, it's in Hilchos Nezikin, that the Gemara says, and in front of me, but this is the basic idea, that if somebody goes to live into, he goes to he squats in somebody else's property. Nobody's using a house, and he goes in. So the Gemara handles there with midastom. Can you stop the guy? All that. That's a whole sugya. But the Gemara says that a person who went without permission into the house of a person into an abandoned house of someone else, so he can taina to the Gemara says in Bava Kama, he could say to the landlord, the owner, that I'm giving you benefit, I'm paying you rent, kilo. I'm giving you benefit because as long as I'm here, I'm keeping the mazikim away. That's how real it was. But if I wouldn't be here, you would have mazikim. And I don't know, like people report that if they leave, real estate people report that if you leave a house completely abandoned for a year, even though nobody ever went inside, you come in, things are broken, things are like somehow or another, maybe mazikin shchicha, I don't know what that is. But certainly the air conditioner doesn't work. But that's a Gemara in Bava Kama. Ki bayis, as Rav Tzadok explains, ki bayis, the word bias, the taich of the word bias, hu makoim shemachzik bayez adavar. A bias means think your house, but think also the bias of your tefillin. The bias is the translation of a bias is something which is used to hold inside of it various things. The kasher chorav. And when it becomes empty, charav means desolate. When you take everything out of the bias, you don't use it. It's an abandoned bias. Charav, me'ein yoishe mimnei adam. No people ever go in there. V'loy mechafotzav also doesn't have his stuff in there because that's a good thing. You leave some stuff in there and it's protected. Im kain hu makom hapchi. It's a great word. It's a makom hapchi. It's not a bias. It's the opposite of a bias. A makom hapchi. Umazik liyishu bnei adam. So it's let's just say for now it's sort of nature abhors a vacuum. So if it's not a bias for people and for stuff and for things and for life, then it becomes a bias for mazikim. But nothing stays empty. Nothing stays empty. It's empty. Empty is not a matzav in this world, yeah?
It almost has a chazak as a key. You can't say, I'm going to move in, all of a sudden they leave. So it's like it has a...
Right, there's a way, you got to get them out.
Yeah.
I'll tell you something, when I first got married, so I would learn in the kollel of Rav Yaacov Hillel. Not Kabbalah, just kollel, and that's where I learned. Nighttime, all night was Kabbalah, and all day was Nigla. That's the way we learned, and actually, this was many years ago, actually learned with him B'chavruza Masechta Shabbos. But he asked me after Seder if I want to help him with something. He's going to take care of something, so I said, sure, what do you need? He was a Rosh Kollel. So he said that he just bought a piece of property. He's going to use it for publishing. He bought a piece of property somewhere in there, so I don't remember exactly what it was, but somewhere behind Zupnik. It wasn't at that time a frum neighborhood. It was like becoming a frum neighborhood, like where Strauss, like where the taxis are. So he said, you want to come with me? He just bought this piece of property, and he bought it from a group of prostitutes. It was a beis nus, and he's got to go in there and do a tikkun. So can I help him out? Okay, sure. Let me get my work clothes. We went in with another guy and did a tikkun. So I have no idea what we did. I have no idea what we were masakin. And all I know is we walked around in a circle 10 times and said stuff. But it was just like to him. It was just okay. I got to take care of this because I just bought some property. There was something going in there. But so that's if a place. So that's even worse. In other words, that's not only desolate, but the kochos hatuma went into it, and there's a way to get the kochos hatuma out of it to fill it with kedusha. And that's like Avraham is saying, because they already have like a chazaka, not the people, but the energy of the place is bad. We hear a lot of stories like that. Habinyan. It actually, the Gemara says that this is not just a ruchnius thing, it's actual gashmius thing. In other words, the guy could say to the owner, the guy in Bava Kama, could say to the owner that I want to, I'm here, I'm doing you good, because actually less things break, the plaster doesn't crack, the paint doesn't peel off. It actually makes a big difference in gashmius. Maybe there's a scientific explanation for this, but that's what the Gemara says. Shabinyan mitzarchei bnei adam u'achar shezeh hipoch hayishuv, and this is the key of Reb Tzadok, hapchi, hipoch. After it's the opposite of a yishuv, ugam kein hapchi umazik levinyan. It's also a hafchi. How would you translate hafchi, by the way? What do you think it actually means? Yeah, obviously the word hepech, but a hafchi. I don't know the grammar. What do you say? Hafchi. Like the anti-inhabitants. It's a hafchi. Meaning it's not a verb that it's mahapech. It becomes a hafchi. Yeah. Hugam ken hafchi umazik lebinyan shehu miklal hayishuv. What I want to look at this a little bit. So Reb Tzadok has this other sefer called Tzidkas Hatzadik. He wrote a whole book on this, and in that sefer Tzidkas Hatzadik, it's about all kinds of malachim, but it's also about mazikim, and he explains it in a way that we can sort of understand it. And I want to get to it for in a minute, but I'm going to start with the end here, because the Musar Haskell that Reb Tzadok says is fantastic. He says that a yisoid is that if let me say correctly, any part of our life or our community which is left to be desolate in even our own day, you leave places levatola. In our own mind, let's say there are parts of our mind that we're not using. Reb Tzadok's yisoid is it fills up with mazikim. If you have to, this is like Merumaz in Rashi and by Yosef, where the brothers looked at the bar and they said, "Ma yimein boy, nachashon v'akrov miyesh boy." Some Sefer al-Torah speaks this out very clearly that Ma yimein boy, Mayim Torah and all that, but Ma yimein boy, again, nature abhors a vacuum, but it gets filled with the negative stuff. And why is that? I want to try to explain on Mokum Shiyonai Magas. I can't explain too much because I don't know too much. But let me just show you a couple of things here. First of all, I just want to point out that, which I'm sure you know, that in Chumash, here. In Chumash in Parshas Hazinu, it's really where the whole thing begins. Parshas Hazinu, Moshe Rabbeinu is. Does anybody actually learn Hazinu? It's a rough time of year, and it's not like the Shiur of B'Shalach. It's a rough Shira. He's rough on the Jewish people, and it's a very difficult. And I just, for some reason, started getting into learning it with a little bit of with Rashi, recently. But anyways, he says, Moshe Rabbeinu says, and pay attention to the word here, Dor tapuchais hema. Like Chaim said, good. It's not just upside down. It's the anti-world. It's the anti-generation. It's a hapchi. So Moshe Rabbeinu says, Dor tapuchais hema banim le'emun bam. Hem kinuni, and he's talking about. It's very similar to the tochacha in the sense that this is what happens if you do good, and this is what happens if you do bad. But what he says is hem kinuni b'loy el ki asuni ba'avlehem vani akniem b'loy am. So if Klal Yisrael is kinuni, Rashi says hiviru chamasi, they light a fire below el. where they don't believe in God properly. If the Jewish people get to the place where we're below El, ani akniem below am, I will torture them, us, that would be chas v'shalom, with loam. This Rabbi Yaakov Kamenetsky famously said that the Palestinians are a loam. It's a loam. Rashi says below am, uma shein lo shem. It's not a proper, it's not a proper, we're in war with Russia or with Poland or something like that. It's like he referred to the Palestinians. That's an example of a loam. And that loam is a direct result of kinuni b'loy el, ki asuni b'havleim, ani akniem b'loy am. B'goy novel achisem. There will be a goy novel. Ki yesh kodcha ba'api v'tikad ad shol tachtis v'toichel eretz v'yivula. They'll start eating up Eretz Yisrael v'tlayit moistei harim. There's your hilltop youth. Aspel le morois chitzay achalabam. Then Moshe Rabbeinu says, mysterious words, he says, Mezei rov, uluchume reshef, v'ketev meriri, v'shen behemois ashalach bam. These are the things that I'm going to send. Achlek is in the Rishonim actually, if he's sending it on us for not doing the Ratzon Hashem, or that's how he's getting rid of them. But he names these things. Mezei rov, uluchume reshef, v'ketev meriri, shen behemois, these appear also in the Yom Kippur Piyutim, and they appear also in the Hashanas, by the way, these words, but it's in Chumash. Rashi says, Shedim. Rashi's touched the whole thing. These are ghosts. We're not talking about they're going to come with this kind of tank or that kind of rocket, or this kind of terrorism. Chume Reshef, L'chume Reshef is Hashedim. He says it over a few times. As it says in Iyuv, B'nei Reshef Yagbiu Uf. V'hem shedim, ketev meriri, shade, shishmai meriri. These are ghosts. And these are not Casper the Friendly Ghost. Anybody over the age of 30 here? Which I find interesting. I want to speak about Casper, but it's very important. But these are the what's going to happen if you do this interesting thing. If you're a dor tapuchais, and if you're a dor tapuchais, and you're a beloyel. So beloyel is not just you don't have an emunah. It means that everything. I think this is the Pashut of Pshat. Everything in this life and in this world can fill up with Hashem, with Shechina. The Shechina is Hashem. If you take that component out of it, it automatically is going to fill up with these, what Rashi calls shedim. It's a koach, and it could be that we'll be able to explain why, or at least the Ramchal explains why. But that's Moshe Rabbeinu Rashi. It's not talking about any kind of Kabbalah or Hasidus or black magic or something like that. That's unfortunate. Rashi goes over each one of these things. It doesn't explain what they do. So, in Shulchan Aruch it says that during the 3 weeks, Shivasar B'Tammuz and till Tisha B'Av, so besides for the Chorban bias and everything that all that, what was the 3 weeks? Besides for the historical component, it says that one shouldn't hit their kids or their talmidim. I don't think you should ever hit your kids or your talmidim, but you shouldn't hit your kids or your talmidim, especially sakana ki ketev meriri shoylek boy, because the ketev meriri, that's this word for Moshe Rabbeinu, ketev meriri shoylek bo. And if you look inside in the makor, the Shulchan Aruch brings it from the rokeach, but it's more than the rokeach. It goes right back to, the Beis Yosef brings a lot of makoros for it. I don't know why he punked in the Shulchan Aruch there in Bergoyla, it says the rokeach, but it starts from, it's not just the 3 weeks. There's 2 parts of the Ketev Meriri, and one part starts Rosh Chodesh Tammuz, and then the second part starts Shivasar B'Tammuz until Tisha B'Av. So it's really the whole Tammuz. which is a shlita of the Keter Meriri. I'm not saying this to scare anybody, but I'm just saying, Keter Meriri. So if we look, let's just do a little bit of a deep dive here. If we look in Yeridea, there's a whole simon about this stuff. So in Yeridea, in Kufayin Tes, immediately following Hilchas Ribbus, where everybody takes like a breather. You're learning Shulchan Aruch. It's a hard bunch of simanim here. So in Kufayin Tes, the Shulchan Aruch turns to Hilchas Ma'oineinu Machashev, the din of Kishuf. And all kinds of, Uba Yutasi Ifim. So the Shulchan Aruch goes with the Rambam, the Mefarshim point out. One second to find this here. Ein shoylem b'chayzim kaycham alei begorolos mishum shenamar tamim tiyeh Hashem alekecha v'kol shkein ta'asir lishol b'koismim u'menachshim u'mechashvim. And he goes on to say the Mefarshim point out, the Nosei Kelim point out that according to the Shulchan Aruch, tamim tiyeh Hashem alekecha means don't even think about these things. It's kind of like the opposite of what we're learning now. Don't even worry about it. Don't even think about it. Just don't get involved with it because tamim tiyeh Hashem alekecha. Anyways, without the whole pilpul, so the Gra says, Dafka mishum tamim. That the ve'eno oiver b'loisa say, rak ba'oiver yadoni. That according to the Machaber, you're over a mitzvah's essay of tamim tiyeh Hashem alekecha, but you're not worried about oiver yadoni. So that's the Gra and Gimel. And Yud Gimel, I believe, he says as follows. Okay, because in Siv Vav, one more thing, Misha Nashchai Akravs, the Shulchan Aruch says like this: if you get bit, God forbid, by a scorpion, so mutter lilchai shalav. Lilchai shalav doesn't mean you're whispering to it or you're blowing on it, but you're allowed to do this kind of magical thing to get so you don't die from the scorpion bite. So that's mutter, says the Shulchan Aruch, lilchai shalav, afilu b'Shabbos. What's the chiddush of Shabbos? It's not a refuah, right? It's not considered a refuah. But afal pi she'ein adavar moil klum, says the Shulchan Aruch, even though you're really wasting your time, shtus. Hoyel masukanhu, it's a sakana. So he tiru kadesh like teacher of daitay olav, complete psychological fix. So you learn from here, afilu b'Shabbos, that if a refuah is completely psychological, it really is not doing anything. Placebo, it's really not doing anything. It's for the Yishuv Adas, you're not going to die. Apparently, you're allowed to take a refuah on Shabbos, even if it's a waste, even if it's not a refuah. If not a refuah, it doesn't make it more kosher. It makes it, you would think it makes it less, but it's not a refuah, but you can do it. So the Gra says like this: Afal pi she'eino oiseh klum. So it says the Gra. What do you mean? Leiche shalamaka is a Gemara. The Chazal did it. What do you mean? Afal pi she'eino oiseh klum. What is he dismissing it? The whole thing says the Gra. Zedas harambam. Chen kasav b'ferish hamishna. Parak Dalabah v'Dazara. The Rambam says this in the Yad. The Rambam says this in the Pirish HaMishnayos. Avokol habayim acharav cholku alav. Everybody argues with this Rambam. Sharei harbe lachashim nemer b'Gemara. It's all over the Gemara. Indian of lachash. Nimshach he the Rambam nimshach achar hafilosofia ha'arura. The Rambam got corrupted by philosophia, the cursed philosophy. This is so controversial. What I'm reading you is that this Gra used to say philosophia ha'arura, and then when they Achim Ram, when they reprinted the Shulchan Aruch, they took out the word arura. Nimshach achar philosophia. They took out the word arura, and here in this Oz V'Hadar, I think this is, the Friedman also in the Oz V'Hadar, they put back in parentheses the arura, because it's not a big deal anymore. But apparently, when this was printed, it was like Philosophia Arura. It's going to discredit the whole. I also heard a cynical pshat that the same printers who printed the Shulchan Aruch printed the Rambam. So it would have hurt the sales of the Rambam. Spoke to me as a publisher. It would have hurt the sales of the Rambam if they would quote the Rambam. The Gra is saying that the Rambam was doing something arur. So they left it out. That's why the Rambam writes Shekshofim v'Shemos v'Lachashim v'Shedim u'Kmiyos Hakol hu sheker. Avol kvar hiku oisai al kod kodai. The Rambam got patched for this, says the Gra. Shorab matzinu harbe maisius b'Gemara al pi Shemos u'Kshofim. Amra I Milsa v'Asir la'arvta. He brings a whole bunch of Gemaras, the Gra. Okay, a whole bunch of Gemaras. I think it's 7 Gemaras. V'harbe ki yotzei. V'amru b'soif parak arba misais chulun lama nikra shmak shafim atari idu v'yu taninim. The Torah says in before a story with Moshe Rabbeinu v'yu taninim ayin zoyar v'chein kamiyan b'harbe mekoymais l'chashim rabul mosaber v'alas hafilosofia harura hatasai b'rayv lacha. The Rambam just got so farkishut with get the pun here, with philosophy, that he just got carried away and he argued with the Gemara. So says the Gra. L'farish ha-Gemara kol b'derech haltzi v'laker oisam mipshatam. Took away the pshat of the Gemara. V'chas v'shalom. This is so uncharacteristic of the Gra, I think. Chas v'shalom eni mamin b'hem. I don't believe what the Rambam is saying. Loy mehem v'loy me'amoinam. They're all philosophers. El kol advarim hem kivshutan. Elashiesh b'hem pnimiyos, loy pnimiyos shabalei ha-filosofia shezarkan oisei la'ashpa. All of these things have a very deep meaning to it and a very deep spirit to it, kishuf and shedim and all these things, but not the pnimiyos of the filosofia shezarkan oisei la'ashpa shehem chitzonius, which is trying to give some kind of an external explanation to him. El Shabalei MS. This is in the Tchum, I believe that's what the Gra means, of the Mekubalim. And the Mekubalim understand what the stuff is. And the Rambam did not understand Kabbalah, hence he wrote what he wrote. What a Gra. Okay. You'll find, by the way, the sheet of the Gra connected the Rambam in a number of places, but in Kan Makoma. But the Gra was first of all, he didn't want to go against, just to sum it up, the Pashtus HaGemara, and the Rambam with his so-called rationalism could not fartrog the Pashtus of the Gemara, so he translated it a little bit differently, or more. I don't know how he understood it. There's all Mar Nevuchim about this. That the Rambam explains what the mazikim are and how it works, and it's just a fake thing in the Bria, it's people's imagination. That's what he says. I heard once from the Kotzker, he said, from the time that the Rambam said that there's no such thing as mazikim, there's no such thing as mazikim. The Kotzker, because the Rambam took him off the world. There's a Rambam, so there's a Hasidic pshat in the Rambam connected the Gra, that the Rambam was bedafka, like removing mazikim by saying that it's fake, discrediting them. Change the Bria Gufa. That was like a tikkun, yeah. There's so much, by the way, and this is probably like in so many areas, and so many minhagim, and so many things. This is probably one of the biggest differences in the hanhagas of the Hasidim and the hanhagas of the Misnagdim, because even though we go with the Gra wasn't a practical, and therefore he just said don't mess up the Gemara. But certainly between the rationalists and the Mekubalim, this was huge. So. By Avraham ben Avram Ruach Ra, not Mazikim. So Ruach Ra is one of the 7 Mazikim that the Gra identifies. And so yes, the story is that when, supposedly, I think Hakohen said that that when Avram ben Avram gave up his life, Al Kiddush Hashem, so there was no more Ruach Ra in the world. But it's probably the Gra still wash Wasser. I don't think that it's. The Nadel families are all experts on this subject. I told David Shalom to write a book about it, because Kohanim are always touching their shoes. Think about it. So the question is, what do I have to do? Go wash Wasser? Put on your shoes, take off your shoes? How does it work? So he has one of his sons very, very ill. Let me tell you a couple of things here. Number one is that something I saw. I couldn't find it. I couldn't find the sefer on Rav Hutner. Rav Hutner is Pachad Yitzchak, but one of the volumes of Pachad Yitzchak is called Zichronos. So I have them all. I don't have that one, Zichronos. Not Igros, but Zichronos. And I couldn't put my hand on the sefer this morning. I don't know, maybe somebody borrowed mine. But I remember he says a very interesting touch of the whole thing. He says that Mazikim go into the world of Dimyan. And the world of Dimyan, imagination. And the world of Dimyan is what he calls a reality / unreality. Meaning, we say, he says, as I'm quoting him, he says, when we want to say something is not real, we say it's a figment of our imagination. But imagination is a real thing, in the sense that imagination can change your blood pressure. You could die from your imagination. Imagination, today it's very common during Corona, where you couldn't travel here and you couldn't travel. They invented magications, vacations. I forgot what they call it. But the idea is you could take a vacation in your head. You don't have to go all the way to the beach, just be there like this. So is it a reality? So if you'll go into one of those machines where they stick a million things on your head and monitor everything, apparently it's actually flicking the buttons in your brain the same way as actually being there, probably better. And you could avoid the priestess, So it's money. So it's imagination. He calls it the reality / unreality. And he says that the mazikim are as real as you imagine them to be. So, and that's why he explains the Gemara. The Gemara says at the end of Psachim, not the end of Psachim, the Gemara says that if you're choshish for mazikim, they're there. If you're not choshish for them, they're not there.
This is
Rav Hutner. Not him. Rav Hutner. Which in a certain way is miyashiv the Gra and the Rambam, no? You get that? I'm not sure what I'm saying. Why? Why do you think it's miyashiv the Gra and the Rambam?
The Rambam was not didn't give any chashivas to Mazikim, so maybe for him they didn't exist. The God did give chashivas to Mazikim. So.
And then the Gemara itself says that if you're choshish for them, they're there. Not choshish for them, they're not there. Right? So it's but it's such a strange bria. But when you think about it, if you want to get philosophical for a moment, imagination itself is a very strange bria.
It's the same thing.
Why?
Meaning, however you want to look at it, you can call it imagination, you can call it psychology, you can call it ruach. The amount of time that I spend in that thought, that's how much it will affect me.
That becomes more reality.
They're all saying the same thing, just different angles.
But is it the machshava that triggers whether they're real or not? It's the machshava itself that triggers?
I think there's two ways of looking at this. One way of looking at it is, I have no idea what happened. One way of looking at it is that my machshava actually creates something. It's actually creating this mazik.
Creates it for you, though. It doesn't seem to create it for others, which is our society.
So what happens when you abandon a house? Shchiach mazikim, according to Rav Hutner.
There's nobody there, so.
Yeah. So Reb Tzadok comes and he tells us that, it's a little. I think it's a little bit different. And again, somebody can really research this, but I think Reb Tzadok comes to tell us that the bias is a metaphor. It's a little bit different than imagination. The bias is a metaphor for life, that which holds something. And if you're creating a void in any part of life, so it fills up with mazikim. Reb Tzadok in the Sichas Malachi Asharis, listen to this, talks about it psychologically. He said that, the Gra says that the makar of all problems, human problems, is shimum. People are bored. That's what he says. I mean, when you're bored, when you're on empty, you don't stay on empty. So it's a human condition where if we're not kind of filling up our minds with chachma and our hearts with love, and so what's going to happen is psychologically, mazikim are going to get in, and it's ad kedei kach, says Reb Tzadok over here, that it will actually break the walls. In other words, it can actually manifest itself in a physical way, which for sure we see with our own minds and our own bodies. By the way, I read once that why did I talk about Casper, the friendly ghost? Because it was an era of pushing. All those shows had their deep meaning, and the deep meaning there was all about the very, very hot psychological trend that was going on that time of embracing your demons, and it was a whole method, which it probably still is. It just changes names every 5 years. It's called something else, but the idea is that like the ghosts within or the demons within, or the dark parts of our lives, if God forbid we were abused or whatever, and just sort of catching up with those things, and they're make them friendly. They're not your enemies.
Positive psychology. Positive psychology.
Okay. It sounds a little bit reductionist, but the idea is that there are things that are going on in our mind, and I think this is very Reb Tzadok, embrace it. There are things that are going on in our mind which we don't even realize because it's so stuffed away from different traumas or whatever that we've gone through life, and they're affecting us. They're making us afraid to do this, and too loud and too soft and too shy, and they're affecting us in not necessarily a positive way. And the psychological spirit at the time, and I still think it is, with almost every different type of I'm not a psychologist, but almost every type of therapy that you hear about in some form or another comes down to like Casper, the friendly ghost, find your demon and give it a hug and it's okay, and so I believe it's very Reb Tzadok, and if you don't, it fills up with mazikim. I remember I gave a talk once, and I'll just do a talk once in the University of Buffalo about Kabbalah. I lived in Buffalo, and they invited me to talk about Kabbalah in the Christian department, not in the Judaic Christian department. So I spoke about Kabbalah, but preceding me in that same kind of session was this, I don't remember too much of what he said, or did I understand, but was this psychologist who was explaining different aspects of his psychology. So when he got up at the podium there, so he said, "Let me introduce myself. My name is John." I think his name was John. And standing next to me, there was nobody standing next to him, is Johnny. And Johnny was him when he was a child. And John is standing here as a professor speaking to you, and Johnny's afraid to be here. and he went back and forth. I remember he explained something which kind of spoke to me, probably because of all of my, we all have our things. But he said that sometimes, you'll have this was his vort, sometimes you'll have a plant, and the plant will turn into a tree, and the little things, they grow this way and that way and big, and they're all over the place. And then there's one little one that never grew. Like Meza Siba Shatia, never grew. And it needs a special kind of a tipul. And, be nice to that little branch, maybe give it a cut and allow the new things to come up. But this was the psychology that people were embracing in the times of the half-an-hour black and white shows that took place after school. So Casper, Casper is an omic to the whole Casper, written by a psychologist. But Linyanenu Torah Lahavdil, what Reb Tzadok, I think, as opposed to Rav Hutner, and he's learning that it's a psychological reality. Now, let me just show you one thing. I have 5 minutes, right? So let me just show you the Ramchal. The Ramchal is a very important paragraph in the Ramchal. The Ramchal is in Sefer HaKlolim, which is in the back of Das Tvunos, at least if you have my edition. And it's klolim, kishmo kenhu. He has different klolim, different klolim, and here he has klolei maimer hachachma, which is a very beautiful thing to learn. And what the Ramchal does, if you look at it correctly, is it actually makes it easier to understand. But he talks here, he has an entry called the Sitra Achra. We all know about the Sitra Achra a little bit. So the Sitra Achra is kind of like the other side, sounds scary. There's two things that I think people get confused, Sitra Achra and Klipais. So those are two different ideas which are all in the same thing. But what is a Sitra Achra? The other side. The other side of what? Just push it up shot. Other side of what? Sitra Achra. It's all over the Zohar. Sitra Achra. Other side of Kedusha. Or more specific, right. And why does it need to be another side? Because this is the way the world works. There's a balance of, it's deeper than Zelu Mazeh. It's like we have good bacteria and bad bacteria in our body. You know, one of the problems with antibiotics is they kill all the bacteria. The microbiome is constantly creating good bacteria. You need bacteria to fight illness. Bacteria is a fighter. So like, there's a lot of what seems to be very, very negative and painful, which is also required in order for the world to exist. A positive and a negative in the Bria. Davar bar. That's what the Sitra Achra is. More specifically, the Sitra Achra, there's the Spheros. And I'm just going to dial Hakima Baramisa. But there's the spheres, there's 10 spheres, or let's talk about the 7 spheres. So the 7 spheres, Chesed Gvur Tiferes Netzach Hod Yesod Malchus. That's like when you see the 7 spheres. There's a backside to the 7 spheres. Like think about a embroidery where it's so beautiful, and then you turn it around and you see a big mess. And you think, what kind of mess is this? It's so random. And then you turn it around and you see a beautiful picture. That's the famous mashal of the embroidery. That's the same thing with the 7 spheres. The 7 spheres have the front side, and the 7 spheres have a back side to them. That back side is called the Sitra Achra. So it's not just the other side of Kedusha, it's the other side of the Spheres Gufa. Spheres means, Pirusho Shel Davar, that as the world is being created, every second it's going through the emanations of these 7 spheres. Hein letov v'hein l'ra, or let's not even call it ra, sitra de yamina and sitra de smola. And that's how the whole thing comes down. Sitra Achra says in Ramchal, he klal koiches nivroim, v'yesh ba tchila asara mekores makpilim, v'hafachim l'eser b'spheres. That the 10 spheres of the Sitra Achra exactly correspond with the 10 spheres of Kedusha. V'nikroim gam came b'shem zed, dahainu eser spheres shel klipa. That's what they're called, eser spheres shel klipa. So here you see Sitra Achra and klipa mean the same thing. Who's v'nechlokim la'arba elamas? You know, the Svarim are full of things like everybody who drowned in the flood turned into a shade. Everybody who got killed at the Tower of Babel became a different kind of a shade. I don't know anything about that. No, you don't have to care about it. But what is important to know, I think, is that you have and the Nechlakim also divides up into the Arba Lamas, Atzilus, Bria, Yitzira, and Asiya. Makbilim means they're parallel, B'hafachim la'atzilus, Bria, Yitzira, Asiya, de Kedusha. So in the Klipa and in the Sitra Achra, there's also 4 worlds and there's also 10 spheros. Why does this have to be? Because that's the way the world operates. The world operates on a positive, negative basis. Negative is hard to swallow, but the fact is that is the way Hashem made the world. V'amnam arba madregas te klipa yesh zu kasha mizu b'chol achas mehem arba ilamas hatzilus b'ri yitzir asiya. The Arba Madregas Nikrais Ruach Sa'ara, remember Eliyahu Navi? Ruach Sa'ara, Anan Gadol, Eish Misla Kachas Vin Noga. So you have, this is what's called in Kabbalistic literature, that the klipas have levels and layers to them. And you have the Shalish Klipas Hatmeos, Am I bugging everybody's mind? I'm just saying something very simple. Don't get nervous about it. The shalosh klipas hatmeis and the klipas noiga. The way the mashal I always give is if you look at a peanut, you'll have like the outermost shell with the corrugation. Then you have another shell, and then there's the one which is right on, almost stuck to the peanut itself. And you could eat it actually. You could eat it, not eat it. Probably when they make peanut butter, they don't bother taking it off. Just goes right in. So that's like a mashal to the klipas noiga. The unique thing about the klipas noiga is that it's a klipa. There's 4 klipas, and it's the klipa that can go this way, can go that way. I always bring out in the siddur, Lamalshina Malti Sikva, that we say about these chol rishe sa'aker usashaber usmager. Chol. No, before that was Sakir, yeah, I'm saying what does it say right before that? Usakir, Ushaber, Usmager is going on the klipas, the Arizal says. Visachnia, that's the 4th klipa. Bimheria Mena Sachnia means let's get the klipas noiga over to our side. That's the kavan of the davening over there. So he says, and that's the Ruach Sarah, Anon, Gadol, Eshmis Lakachas, Vinoga, the 4 stages that Eliyahu Hanavi had to go through. Shalosh Me'ela Ha'arba Zara Gomor. 3 of the 4 are Ragamor. Klipas Noiga, Yesh Lo Zmanim. The Klipas Noiga has its moods. Pamim Shemischaberes Hima Shalosh V'Nasis Ra. Sometimes it can go over to the 3 that it become bad. Upamim Mishtabedes L'Kedusha V'Nitvelas Lan. Sometimes it becomes Kadosh. Klipas Noiga. By the way, the Shafsai Tzvi's shul in Yerushalayim was called Or Noga. And the book that the Reform wrote, justifying, I talked about in the Shiur on Shabbos, justifying the Reform movement, was also called Or Noga. Noga. You'll find a bunch of times, I don't know if by accident or deliberate, but there's a lot of reference in that whole kind of world of the klipas noga. There are things that could be good, they could be bad. Not everything is black and white. That's the idea. Organ is the example that they give. It could be beautiful. You could have a lot of ruchnias from it, an organ, or you could be Mechal Shabbos with it. When the klipas noiga becomes good, it separates from the 3. Umischaberes lekedusha, umitaheres. It gets close to the kedusha, umitaheres, v'nikras, toisefes, michol ala kodesh. This is such a fantastic thing, by the way, because in the Pirkei Avos, it says that the Asar Dvarim Nivru Bein Hashmashas, right? Erev Shabbos Bein Hashmashas, and V'yeshaimrim Af HaMazikin. The Mazikin were created Erev Shabbos Bein Hashmashas. What's that? Oh, no. The Maral explains in Derech Chaim that the pshat, anything that was created ben hashmashos is chelik min hakodesh v'chelik min hachol. It's kind of this mixture ben hashmashos, chelik of kodesh and chelik of kedusha and chelik of chol. So it's mamish klipas noiga. So ben hashmashos is like this zman, which is the bria is over, so it's not chol. Shabbos didn't begin. It's not kodesh. We can come along and be mekadesh the ben hashmashos. So we're taking that area of nishtahin nishtaher, and we're turning it into a davar shebekdusha. It was at that time that the mazikim were created. This is in Pirkei Avos. Why? Akasher mazikim, other things. We know the ayol shel Yitzchak, which is also chelik min hakodesh, chelik min hachol, chelik min hakodesh. Why mazikim? Because mazikim are really in the world to do good for the world, but they could also do bad for the world. The mazikim could be, it's like in the human body. They can do things which promote health somehow, or they can kill you. It depends on how you nourish them and how you take care of it. So this is the Ramchal says. Nikras toisefes, these mazikim, or the sitrachar as he's talking about, toisefes michoil ala kodesh shehu toiv. V'hinei min hamakor se'elu shezacharnu mispashtim ha'nofim. He says this over and over again. This is a cloud. The pshat in a cloud, the Ramchal's, is that now go plant this tree and you'll get all kinds of branches everywhere you go. V'heim cloud, but what I'm telling you is the pshat in Malachi HaChavola, Hashedim, V'chol HaMazikim. Clear in the Ramchal. That this is the pshat in the Mazikim. So the Mazikim are ben Hashmashos, and the Mazikim. So if we just to very, very quickly summarize, because I said a lot of things here, but in other words, whether you take the Gra's word about the Gemaras, Gra's the Gra, the Rambam could have said something like, could be like something like the Kotzker said that, well, if we just get them out of our minds, they're out of our reality, and they're not a reality. Rav Hutner comes along and he says, well, it is a reality, it's not a reality, it depends how you look at it. Rav Kook, I believe, held that we're already in a generation where we're mahapich the klipos into toiv. That's part of his whole movement, as we've spoken about ba'arichas. And Rav Tzadok looks at it over and over again as something psychological, of the demons within. Those are the mazikim, and we create them, and they're real, and they can kill you. And we can't let, and the Musar Haskell is, from all of this, is that don't leave a vacuum. Don't leave void. You have a brain, use it, all of it. You have time, use it, all of it. You have a place, use it, all of it. Because that 1 inch of the place that you're not going to use is going to get these cobwebs called the mazikim. And the mazikim, like according to the Ramchal, once you capture them over, they're ben hashmashes. You were Mosef Michal ala kodesh. You made kedusha out of it. And once you make kedusha out of it, then we have all the koach and all the strength. So Balatani talks about this. He says, "Ezu gibor koivesh." That's Yitzchak. It's a kavisha operation. It's a conquering operation. It's not a killing operation. So the idea is to Moshe Rabbeinu Noach. It says in the Medrash Rabbah, he took the mazikim on the boat with him because he wanted to preserve them. Okay, I'll leave you with that.